So tonight I was thinking about the issue of trust, and I have a tendency to not trust people by and large. Just I guess it's because I extrapolate possibilities, in my mind, and to some degree, and then I don't know why. But anyway, I was thinking about this issue, and I was thinking about how I trust my son to a degree, and then why is it that I trust my son? He's 5, but how is it that I trust my son, and then not trust some people, other people? And what came to me was kind of interesting, and this sounds really simple, but in part we don't teach this type of thing to our kids, so I kind of want to look at this. So let's say this is my son over here, right? So this is how much I trust, okay? And then let's say someone else, perhaps I don't trust very much, right? So a little bit of trust, okay? And then one of the aspects involved in trust is, built into our defense mechanisms. Like, we tend to trust with, I don't want to say it's directly tied to necessarily this, but there is some capacity where this affects our trust. The capacity for a person to hurt you, So if the capacity to hurt is like this, it seems to overshadow the trust. So if somebody is in a greater position to hurt you, in some ways, my son might be because he's close to me, right? Maybe my guard is down a little more or something like that. But then on the other hand, he doesn't have certain levels of responsibility. So I guess you could also say that this, is responsibility. So his level of responsibility or capacity or what I've entrusted him with is lower on my son's end of things, right? So, so because I have not given him, an extra, amount of space or responsibility or, whoops, it's hurt, right? Yep, hurt. And responsibility. Yep. So because I haven't given him, this extra authority, I haven't given him. Well, first off, his mental capacity is not what someone else's might be yet. Although he is a smart kid, but he's not to the place where I give him any type of authority or capacity to hurt me. What he can do to me at his age is not something that I need to worry about. So therefore, it's easy to trust, if that makes sense. On the other hand, someone else may have, a greater capacity to hurt somebody, hurt me or whoever this applies to, and therefore, the tendency to trust goes down. And what I find interesting on this side of things, when it comes to, kids or teaching and adulting, parenting, I should say. So let's look at the parenting, spectrum, is that we don't really teach our kids this. We don't. They grow up and they sense all this trust, and then as time goes on and they reach their teenage years, they don't have that sense of trust, because their capacity to wreck the car has gone up from not driving to driving, or whatever else it may be, and so therefore, as the responsibility rises, the trust in some cases will go down, depending on the child, and I think that if there's some degree of this that's wisdom, right? Like as things start to let's find a different color here. as this starts to go up, it's wise to, or I feel it's wise to have some degree of hesitation. People buy their kid a 10-year-old car sometimes because you don't want to wreck a new one, right? Like, or whatever the case may be. Like it's a learning vehicle, and it may get scratched. They might hit something or sideswipe something. Like so the level of potential for that to hurt your wallet at least, or your insurance policy, is higher. So therefore, there's things we build into this where we just don't trust them quite with a new car by themselves. But to some degree, beyond like normal things like that, I think that it's potentially detrimental, because a kid grows up and they're young and they feel that trust, and then when they're older they don't feel that trust, and when this type of thing is not clearly conveyed to the child, like the question becomes why, and I think that there's a tendency for people to be like, well, I think there's different things that parents say, and one of the things would be, but you can't do that. And to a kid, that's kind of devastating because they're like, why can't I do that? And so when that, is answered that way, it leaves room for a lot of speculation, a lot of doubt, a lot of things in their own mind where they're, filling in the blanks, so to speak. But in the case of maybe a better thing to say would be, well, you're not ready yet, and that gives the difference between you can't do that and you're not ready yet is that there's an inclination, like by deductive logic, the child can figure out, okay, I'm not ready yet, so when will I be ready? Okay, I will be ready, so it's probably related to my maturity level, and then this whole thing starts to become more clear. And the understanding of why the trust is not there becomes more clear. And I think that, a lot of the time when this conversation happens, it's in a, it's when the child's feeling vulnerable. It's when they're not being trusted and they don't understand why. And, and now we're trying to convey this type of thing rather than go in proactively and say, from a younger age, even like my son's 5, like I just thought of this tonight. And I'm thinking, so it's not a bad time to teach him this, so he understands, and I think to some degree he actually does understand some of this, but not necessarily this way. And putting visuals and things to it, helps to frame a child's mind from an early age to be able to understand the path of maturity. And I think that's really what I'm getting to, is the path of maturity becomes more clear when we have understanding. And so if you look at this like a circular thing here, with a child, at an early age, you have the trust being high, and then you have the maturity level is low. So maturity, responsibility. So let's say an R in there also. So responsibility, maturity, and then you have the trust, being high. But as the child ages, as we talked about, it kind of ends up flipping. Like or at least in some areas. So you have some areas at least where, and again, like this relates to other people as well that you just don't trust as much. But the trust is low, and then the responsibility or capacity to hurt you, if we're talking about either really, but especially with somebody you don't know as well, or but when we teach the child like this is the model, right? Like the trust is going up. So we from a young age, if we teach them how to become trustworthy and how to become have that mindset of you are a child and it's okay and you're growing, and I think that having this conversation proactively really helps, and as this expands, then they go through these rings I just popped in my head, but what was that movie with Zorro with Antonio Banderas? You know, he talks about, you know, the three rings or whatever. He trains, you know, he trains to become Zorro. Grab this. So yeah, so I mean, as they progress and as they age, you know, they have that understanding. It helps to bring down to mitigate the confusion, mitigate the lack of sense of trust, increase the child's maturity from a younger age, so that by the time that they even get into their teenage years, you know, they're already at a place where they understand the process, they are further along in the process, they're not maybe, hopefully, as prone to you know, these barriers where, like, I guess like the goal is that you don't want to run into issues with your kid, right? When the reason that you're having that issue in the first place is because there's a lack of understanding. And I think building that understanding in at a young age and even at the age of 5 really helps to set the tone, you know, moving forward. And helps to hopefully mitigate a lot of these issues. So I don't think there's anything else that I was thinking earlier wanted to cover with this. But anyway, but this is just kind of like the basic, you know, thing that kind of popped in my head, and I like thinking in visual stuff. That's why I love the Lightboard, because I love to think visually like this, and it helps me understand, you know, to look at things because I'm visual, and so, you know, hopefully it helps you, and hopefully it helps my son, because I might have him look at this too. So anyway, or explain it to him in person. This is kind of a long-winded video for a 5-year-old. So anyway, have a good day.